Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises along with you. Mike Katic is going to be here soon. Indiana Center, friend of the program. The Indiana Hoosiers lost to two teams in this college football season, the Ohio State Buckeyes in the regular season and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in the playoff. So he is a great person to break down Ohio State and Notre Dame, mostly the Ohio State and Notre Dame defenses. Talk a little bit about this year at Indiana. What's it like? The discussion around Indiana. Should they have made the playoff? And now here we sit. They were 11-0 against the rest of the world and 0-2 against the teams in the title game. So Mike Katic will join us in the middle of the show. Tyler Shoemaker in the back half of the show. He's been on Notre Dame all year. He's our betting analyst here at Kings of the North. His bets for this title game and what his numbers are saying about the Buckeyes and the Fighting Irish. He is totally on top of both of these teams. So you'll want to stick around for that. But I'm going to start here solo. Landis is on the road. I'm flying from Columbus to Atlanta at 5 p.m. tonight. So I got to pack stuff, got to get packed up. Landis is driving. So they left yesterday. So Landis, no Landis on this show for the people who are here for Landis. I apologize in advance. I want to talk about the coaches in this game because I do feel like I know these two guys a little bit better than I know Dan Lanning or Sharon Moore or James Franklin because I covered Notre Dame coach Marcus Freeman when he was a player at Ohio State and because I've covered Ryan Day as an assistant here at Ohio State and then as the head coach. And so there's something I want to talk about. It's a big picture thing about how these coaches were hired and what it tells us about how schools maybe should think about things, because these two guys are in a select group when it comes to Power 4 coaches and their resumes before they were hired for these jobs. So I want to get to that at the end, but I want to just sort of talk about them individually first. And I do want to start with Ryan Day. So I can remember for Ohio State fans, the 2016 Clemson national semifinal when Ohio State got shut out 31-0. And Ohio State couldn't throw the ball that whole year. And I have a terrible memory, but there are some things I remember. I just very vividly remember asking Tim Beck, the quarterback's coach, the co-offensive coordinator that year, like, why should you be back? Like, this is not working. And he was already out the door. So he answered those questions, but it had already been decided that he was not going to be back around. Ed Warner and Tim Beck were the co-offensive coordinators after Tom Herman left. So for 15 and 16, Ohio State's offensive coordinators were not up to the typical snuff for Ohio State. So I stood on the field with our friends Bill Landis and Ari Wasserman for Cleveland.com after that game. And Ohio State Urban Meyer had already hired Greg Schiano, a former head coach, as a coordinator, and Schiano was on that staff. So we were thinking like, man, Urban Meyer can kind of get some dudes. And Chip Kelly had just been fired by the San Francisco 49ers after he had left Oregon to go be the Philadelphia Eagles head coach. Was okay there for a while, then didn't work out. He went to the 49ers for 1 year and got fired after 1 year. And we were like, is Chip Kelly the answer for Ohio State for what they need? Because Urban Meyer was determined that they were going to throw the ball better. And it turns out the answer was a Chip Kelly disciple that nobody in Ohio had ever heard of before. And his name was Ryan Day. And Ryan Day was hired and came in here. Chip Kelly went on and was the head coach at UCLA, but Ryan Day had been on Chip Kelly's staff with the Philadelphia Eagles, with the San Francisco 49ers. And he had been with Chip Kelly other stops. Like he had always, you guys know the Chip Kelly connection with Ryan Day. Now I'm not going to run through all of that, but one of the things that Ryan Day, I think, could have been is when Chip Kelly became the head coach at Oregon, because he had initially gone out there as the offensive coordinator. I think Ryan Day could have been on Chip Kelly's Oregon staff sort of at any point. And he didn't want to move his young family that far away from home. They're New England folks. They grew up in New Hampshire. And they just didn't want to make that leap. Or if he had, I think Ryan Day maybe could have been Mark Helfrich and been the guy that is Chip Kelly's offensive coordinator and then maybe takes over as the head coach when Chip Kelly goes to the NFL. But Ryan Day was offered opportunities at Oregon with Chip Kelly. Didn't take it. So now it's like, oh, is Ohio State going to get Chip Kelly? No, they're going to get Ryan Day. And Ryan Day comes in and in 17 and 18, Ohio State throws the ball like they've almost really like never thrown it before. That has not been what this program had been. And Ryan Day, in a lot of ways, like implemented the modern evolution of Ohio State football. And then along the way, we have these things happening with Urban Meyer. There's this 3-game segment in 2018 where Urban Meyer is suspended to open the season. Ryan Day is the interim head coach, wins those 3 games, including a win at TCU. You get a little idea of what this guy who's never been a head coach might be like. And so then when it's announced that Urban Meyer, it comes out during that year that he's going to be like the head coach in waiting. And that's like that people in the know who were, that was like, they were birdseed. Right, a little trail being set, like setting up the fan base for like, hey, this guy's your next coach. So then he takes over Urban Meyer. They announce it simultaneously. I was sick as a dog that day, and it's like 5:00 in the morning. You get a call. It's like, there's a news conference today. Like Urban Meyer is stepping down, is retiring, and Ryan Day is taking over. I was like the sickest I've ever been in a news conference. So here's Ryan Day, and he's handed this opportunity, and Gene Smith thought that he saw something in Ryan Day. So obviously offensive acumen matters. And the other thing that had happened is along the way. So I think there's a path where Ryan Day is on Chip Kelly's staff and at Oregon and maybe winds up on an Oregon path. Maybe as the head coach of Oregon at some point. The other path that could have happened is Mike Vrabel, when he was the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, after Ryan Day was at Ohio State just for 1 year, he offered Ryan Day, he tried to get Ryan Day to be his OC. And Ohio State bumped Ryan Day up to $1 million a year. He didn't take the job. And Matt LaFleur was hired by Mike Vrabel as the offensive coordinator at Tennessee. They had a good year at Tennessee. And then Matt LaFleur became the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. So that's a possible alternate path for Ryan Day. And then the other alternate path is Ryan Day was in the mix at Mississippi State. And I think was like not interested. And then they hired, when he was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and then they hired Joe Moorhead at Mississippi State, the Penn State offensive coordinator, who was great as an offensive coordinator, but was never like the right fit at Mississippi State, never the right cultural fit, and that didn't work out. So there's like multiple, everybody has these. I'm super interested in these stories of the roads not taken for coaches, how the career decisions that you make and don't make that lead you to where you are. Fascinating to me. I'd love to do an off-season series on that. So one of the things we'll talk about at our company meetings. So Ryan Day becomes the head coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. And he's never done this before. He's 39 years old when he's hired. He's never done this. And I think almost everything that has happened for Ryan Day has been a build and an ascension of a guy who was pretty young when he got the job, had never done this before, and was learning along the way. Learning in the spotlight. Learning in one of the best jobs, some would argue the best job, in college football. And Ohio State took that on willingly. They knew that this guy's going to have to learn a little bit. So we talk about a lot about like the teams that the losses that Ryan Day's taken. They've been to really good teams for the most part, right? Only 10 losses in his career. But I wanted to look at it from a coaching perspective for a second. Ryan Day has 10 losses in his career. 3 of them are to Jim Harbaugh. 2 are to Jim Harbaugh, and 1 is to a Jim Harbaugh built team that he was suspended and Sharon Moore was the head coach, but there's obviously Jim Harbaugh DNA throughout that team. And so this is not an excuse for Ohio State to lose to Michigan, but it is a factual admission that Jim Harbaugh knows how to do this. So Jim Harbaugh, when he got to Michigan and when he came to save Michigan and reset Michigan, which he did, you know, he was doing some wild stuff at the beginning. I think in the end, he was like crazy like a fox. Like he kind of was doing some things to maybe put the spotlight on himself to let his team kind of grow in the shadows. It took a while. People thought maybe he was going to get fired. It wasn't instantaneous, but he built something there. And guess what? The Chargers just made the playoffs under Jim Harbaugh in year 1. And guess what? Jim Harbaugh made a Super Bowl with the San Francisco 49ers. Jim Harbaugh's a really good coach. Ryan Day lost to him 3 times or 2.5 times or 2 times and then an asterisk time, whatever. But Jim Harbaugh had more experience than Ryan Day. The third base comment from Jim Harbaugh, all those things, like he turned out to be a very difficult foe for Ryan Day, a Ryan Day who had never done this before, really. Now, he was learning. It wasn't like he was a rookie head coach when he was, well, I guess he was. He did beat Jim Harbaugh as a rookie head coach in 2019. But anyway, let's just acknowledge the fact that Jim Harbaugh is a good football coach. That's 3 of Ryan Day's losses, 2.5. One is to Dabo Swinney, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, is a 2-time national championship head coach in a semifinal. One is to Nick Saban, the greatest coach of all time. One is to Kirby Smart, who is similar to Ryan Day, but was a little bit ahead of him on the path of the experience path in a national semifinal. So like he was losing to some people who just had done this more, right? And again, it's not an excuse, but it's an acknowledgement that there was some learning on the job here. And I know for a fact that Ryan Day is sort of aware of the idea that, like, you know, Kirby Smart won his first national title in year 6 at Georgia. This is year 6 for Ryan Day. Kirby Smart was 52-14 in his first 5 years. Ryan Day was 56-8 in his first 5 years. And again, this is not to excuse anything. It is to say, I think all of this is an ascending path, except they got to the Michigan game this year and they fell off a cliff. And then they had to climb out of this. So it's like the Price is Right, where yodeling, and then you fall off. And then, like the yodeler, what if the yodel guy is like, oh, I'm crawling out of this cliff and then I'm back up on the mountain? That's what this is, because if Ohio State had beaten Michigan this year, this would have been a 6-year ascension of a coach who had never done this and was winning a lot along the way, but was also learning along the way. I think Ryan Day giving up play calling this year was a huge deal. We've talked about that a lot. I think it was a necessary step. I think it was a mature step. I think it was a difficult step. I think it was a step he maybe actually didn't want to take, but kind of knew for the good of the team he had to do, and it's worked great. So credit to him on that. I thought he made a really good defensive coordinator hire. He had worked with Jeff Hafley in San Francisco. Jeff Hafley was here in 2019 when that defense was really good. He leaves after a year to be the head coach at Boston College. That surprised Ohio State that he left after 1 year. Ryan Day went for the familiar in Kerry Combs. That one didn't work out. And then they went out and got threw money at a guy and got the best guy in the market, Jim Knowles. So like, you learned things there. I thought some other assistant coach hires along the way. He went with friends. He went with guys in the building, familiar guys. He shed himself of that and made better hires this year. And I think their staff, like top to bottom, is pretty high on the qualification scale now. You can see this guy learning in real time. And here we are. And I do think, to Ryan Day's credit, I think there have been some guys who coached under Urban Meyer who did not work out as head coaches as successfully as maybe we would have thought or they would have hoped, because they tried to be too much like Urban Meyer. I think the 2 guys that leap to mind the most are Tom Herman, who did a good enough job at Houston to get the Texas job, and Chris Ash at Rutgers. And they were both super important. They're coordinators on the 14 national championship team. But the thing about Urban Meyer is a unique individual, and he is a hard charger. He demands the highest standards from everybody around him. He has everybody living on a knife's edge. It is not a comfortable existence. I think playing or coaching under Urban Meyer, but that is by design. I don't think he would dispute that. I think he believes comfort leads to staleness, and he wants to keep people on edge and fresh. And that is a hard way to live, but if you can do it the right way, it can be super successful. And his career is proof of that. I think some of the careers of the people who tried to do that style without having the Urban Meyer personality is an example of how you fail doing that. So I think Ryan Day has done a very good job of coming out from Urban Meyer's shadow, certainly learning from Urban Meyer, but not trying to be Urban Meyer. I think Luke Fickell, who was under Urban Meyer, but also had played for John Cooper at Ohio State and coached under Jim Tressel. I think he again succeeded at Cincinnati because he maybe learned some things, but didn't take everything. But I think Ryan Day deserves a lot of credit for trying to striking a balance here of what kind of coach he wants to be. And so here we are, and it all makes sense, except for one game. I think I honestly everything, even like the Ohio State's bowl loss to Missouri last year when, Kyle McCord transferred and they played Devin Brown and he got hurt right away and they're down to the third string guy who's not really ready. And then it just gets away from him and it's a weird game. I don't really think that says anything about Ohio State. Their Oregon regular season loss in 2021, their defense was bad. They're playing a young quarterback in CJ Stroud who tried to save him. And if he was a little bit more experienced, he might have saved him in that game, but it was like just a tiny bit too much. I think like almost everything else you can sort of explain except for one game. And it was the one game this year against Michigan that caused every question about Ryan Day to come to the forefront. But there's a lot here. And I think Ohio State made a decision, just like Notre Dame did, that if you're going to hire this guy, we're going to take some lumps, right? Because normally it's like, well, I took lumps when I was the head coach at East Carolina, and then I made mistakes and I learned from them. Now I'm bringing that experience to Ohio State. But there's something about these guys that I want to get to here in a second. Marcus Freeman, similar. So Ryan Day takes over at 39. Marcus Freeman takes over at age 35 at Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman played at Ohio State in 2008. I've told this story many times. I talked about it again with Marcus Freeman during this playoff run. He's like, Doug, get away from me. Stop it with this stuff. Ohio State 06 and 07 loses the national championship game. And there's a group of older players. It's a lot like this year's Ohio State team. Guys who stuck around, motivated by failure, right? Failure in quotation marks, and that you were the second best team in the country instead of the best team in the country. But in 08, Marcus Freeman, left tackle Alex Boone, receiver Brian Robisky, secondary corner who became a safety, Malcolm Jenkins, and fellow linebacker James Laurinaitis. They decided they're going to stay at Ohio State for 2008. So those five guys, we took them for the plain dealer, and we went to High Street in 2008. We did a photo shoot in back alleys. And we had him up on fire escapes. Marvin Fong, my coworker back then, did a great job for the Cleveland Plain Dealer with this. And it was like these five guys were dedicated to Ohio State. So let's just show this photo. It's my favorite photo. I can't get away from this. We have the group shots. This is Marcus Freeman in the back alley. And we told him to wear like their cool guy shirts. So I cannot help it. This still happens to be Marcus Freeman is 38 years old. And every time I see him, this is the Marcus Freeman that I see in my head. This young guy. This guy is the head coach of Notre Dame right now. And we were like, hey, it's remarkable to think of how you couldn't do this today. But in 2008, we worked with the Ohio State Sports Information Department. We're like, can you get your five best players to meet us in an alley for an hour so we can do a photo shoot? It blows my mind. Oh, my God. It's crazy. So Marcus Freeman does that. They get blown out at USC in week 3, 35-3. It ushers in this new era. Terrell Pryor, as a freshman, becomes a starting quarterback. I think there's a little bit of conflict between the young guys and these older guys. It's a changing of the guard in midseason at Ohio State. It's kind of a weird year, but those guys never quite got over the top. They don't have national championship rings as players. But you look at the success James Laurinaitis went on to in the NFL and now in his coaching career. You look, Alex Boone went on and made a Super Bowl with the 49ers with Jim Harbaugh. Brian Robisky was a second-round pick. Malcolm Jenkins has had an unbelievable career on and off the field in the NFL. And now you look at Marcus Freeman, whose playing career, he was drafted by the Bears in the 5th round, bounced around a little bit, and then along the way, about a year in, they figured out that he had a heart issue and he had to retire. Then he comes back and he's a GA at Ohio State. So that career, and he is sort of ushered through this career by Ohio State guys. It's just some really fortuitous timing for Marcus Freeman. He's a GA at Ohio State for 1 year in 2010. Then he works Darrell Hazel. There were two guys on the Tressel staff that I really thought were going to be good head coaches one day. At least by the time I got here. I wasn't here when I didn't cover Ohio State when Mark D'Antonio was on the Ohio State staff, who went on to be a great head coach. So the two guys were Daryl Hazel and Luke Fickell. And I remember I one year did a big story about like Daryl Hazel and Luke Fickell, your head coaching aspirations. How do you pursue those? When do you decide to leave? So Daryl Hazel becomes the head coach at Kent State and is really good, and he hires Marcus Freeman. So Marcus Freeman, as a very young guy, becomes a full-time assistant at Kent State in 2011 and 12. They win so much at Kent State, Daryl Hazel gets the job at Purdue. Marcus Freeman goes with Daryl Hazel to Purdue for 13, 14, 15, 16. So Daryl Hazel starts his career. And then Daryl Hazel, it doesn't work at Purdue. He gets fired. In the middle of 16, Marcus Freeman finishes out that year. And as soon as he does, now it's 2017, and Luke Fickell is taking his first head coaching job. So these two guys who were always Ohio State assistants that had a future you could see as head coaches. Hazel left first. Now Luke Fickell goes to Cincinnati, and he straight from Hazel to Fickell. And he's at Cincinnati in 17, 18, 19, 20 with Luke Fickell. And then here comes this opportunity at Notre Dame. They're so good. They make the playoff. They have this great year. Marcus is running this defense. Luke is a defensive-minded head coach, but Luke had been the linebackers coach, had been Marcus Freeman's coach. So like Luke Fickell is like the older brother for James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman. Laurinaitis now the linebackers coach at Ohio State. So like all this stuff, it is just working out. Like you need to be great, but sometimes you can see the rocks across the stream in front of you. And every time you take a step, somebody puts a rock down for you to land on. And Marcus Freeman has just had some moments where it is really, to get to be the head coach at Notre Dame before you're 40, you need some things to work out. And then you need to take advantage of that. So then after Cincinnati, everybody's coming after him. And Notre Dame and LSU are both interested in him to be the defensive coordinator because Clark Lee, the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame, leaves to take the Vanderbilt head coaching job. So this is open, and he visits both places. He's talked about this, took private jets to both places. It's like being recruited again. And this is a little bit about like what we talk about on Kings of the North. Nobody should think you have to go south to succeed. And Marcus Freeman, to his credit, in 2021 realized that. So he picked Notre Dame over LSU. Ironic that then his opportunity at Notre Dame comes because the head coach at Notre Dame that hired him picked LSU over Notre Dame, and that was probably wrong. Like this is, again, choices you make along the way, right? Urban Meyer, when he left Utah, could have gone to Notre Dame or Florida. Back then, he thought my best chance to win's at Florida. So Marcus Freeman doesn't choose the SEC. He chooses Notre Dame. And then 11 months later, Brian Kelly leaves, and Notre Dame says, we got this guy in the building. What are we going to do? And this is my point, my overall point here. It's the keeping the guy in the building hires. And there are just guys sometimes that if you're a smart AD, if you're a smart university president, you can recognize something in young coaches. And when you have somebody in your building, they are doing their job, but sometimes they are also doing a year-long or years-long interview for the head coaching job. And you get to know that person far more than you would get to know somebody who you bring in on a private jet for 48 hours. And I believe in this, but it is not that common. But I think Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman were clearly both, we got to keep them in the building hires. Are we sure they're ready? No, we're not sure. Do we think they have something special? Yes, we do. We don't want them to leave, go somewhere else, and then we can never get them back. So if we have to suffer a couple bumps along the way, there will be a payoff. It is hard to suffer the bumps along the way. Ryan Day's record in big games. Ryan Day's now 4 straight losses to Michigan. Marcus Freeman's weird losses to Marshall and Northern Illinois. These are what happen to guys who have never done it before. But here we are. And was it worth it? I will be curious. There's always this like, okay, what does this mean for the next trend? How does this affect this? Listen, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma had a huge impact on the Ryan Day hire at Ohio State. Gene Smith talked to Joe Castiglione, the AD at Oklahoma. Lincoln Riley was a keep him in the building hire. It was like they brought him in. He was the hottest offensive coordinator on the market. Oklahoma got him. works with Bob Stoops, and it's almost like, man, I don't. And so like it's kind of like Bob Stoops is going to leave, and Lincoln Riley's going to take over because they thought they had something there. Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, the tragic, unexpected passing of Randy Walker. Pat Fitzgerald is super young. He's linebackers coach at Northwestern, super young. But Northwestern had to pick him because they thought he was going to be something down the line. I think they would have ideally given him another 3 or 5 years of maturation before making him the head coach. But in a tragic circumstance, you had to hire that guy. Before his career ended with the hazing accusations, he had been arguably the most successful coach in maybe not even arguably in Northwestern history. Like, you kept that guy in the building. So the keep the guy in the building hires intrigue me. If you are willing to maybe suffer a little bit until the payoff, there are 8 in the Power 4 right now, 68 Power 4 teams. There are only 8 guys who were hired from within. Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman, Sharon Moore at Michigan. So for any Michigan fans watching this, Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day are your North Stars on this. Was Sharon Moore 1,000% ready for this? I don't know. But what he did, and it's so similar with Ryan Day, because Ryan Day had that little window of being the interim head coach while Urban Meyer was suspended. Sharon Moore had the same thing and did an awesome job, including beating Ohio State while Jim Harbaugh was suspended. So you saw flashes of it, and that helps confirm things. But this is Michigan's plan. So I would just advise Michigan fans, there have been some lows for Notre Dame fans. There have been some lows for Ohio State fans, but look at the payoff. Look at what's happening right now. I think this is out there for Michigan. I thought Sharon Moore was the right hire, but I do think you look at this list, I think you can argue the keep the guy in the building hires are a pretty successful way to go. Again, they don't all work, but I especially think compared to hiring a guy who's never been a head coach who works somewhere else, I would rather hire a guy who's never been a head coach who I know, who's been in my building. Now, if you get somebody with a lot of head coaching experience who worked his way up and worked at the MAC and then worked at another, like a lower level Power 4 job, and now is ready to be like a coach at an elite program, I get that too. I mean, Urban Meyer did that. Bowling Green to Utah to Florida, right? Like bing, bang, boom. I get that. But if you're going to, like Ryan Walters, I think could be this kind of guy. Like Ryan Walters has something. He was at Illinois. Purdue made the hire. Like, he's not inside the building. And then it didn't work out. Now he's going to go be now he's the defensive coordinator at Washington. I think Ryan Walters could work out down the road, but I think it's always a little more risky when you're hiring somebody who's never done it, who hasn't been in your place. So let's go back to the list, Mike. The 8 guys who are the internal hires: Ryan Day, Marcus Freeman, Sharon Moore, Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney takes over in the middle of a season. It's a terrible season. It's going south for Clemson. He takes over. He sort of rights the ship. And then they're like, this guy has something. There is something about this guy. And you read the stories from back then. It's remarkable. Dabo Swinney, when he took over at Clemson, was 39 years old. Ryan Day was 39. Sharon Moore is 38. Marcus Freeman was 35. All right. So like this is what we are talking about here. Dabo, when he got introduced he was the interim, then he got introduced as the head coach, said, "I've never failed at anything in my life. It's not arrogance. I'm confident in my abilities. I don't think it's a gamble at all. I think it's a good investment." This is hiring a guy at Clemson who had never been a full-time head coach before, after Tommy Bowden in mid-October left after 9.5 years. This is, and like, look at this. So like how did they figure this out? Dabo's a good example of this. Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Kyle Whittingham, Urban Meyer helps lift Utah to new heights. Kyle Whittingham had been there before Urban Meyer, stayed, and then he leaves. Kyle Whittingham, who's a BYU alum, is offered the BYU job and the Utah job simultaneously. He's never been a head coach. It's his alma mater versus the place he's been, and he chooses Utah. Look what Kyle Whittingham has done. Internal hire who had never been a head coach. Mike Gundy is the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State for Les Miles. When Oklahoma State was doing the original search when they hired Miles, the 2 finalists were Gundy and Miles. Gundy's an alum at Oklahoma State. They hire Miles as the head coach. They hire Gundy as the OC. When Miles leaves for LSU, they don't even interview anybody. It's straight to Gundy. He's been there for 20 years. They had a terrible year this year, but he's been very successful there. Deshaun Foster at UCLA. Chip Kelly leaves. He's in the building. He's an alum. I think they want somebody who really cares about UCLA because they felt like Chip Kelly was like a little bit of a vagabond, right? This is what you're hoping for at UCLA. You point at Marcus Freeman, you point at Ryan Day, you point at Dabo Swinney, and you hope for this. And then Brent Key at Georgia Tech, again, takes over. He's an alum, takes over in the middle of the year when Jeff Collins is fired, and Georgia Tech has been quite good. They're quite happy with Brent Key. So these are the only 8 out of 68. This is it. So there is a risk here, but there is a reward here. And I am fascinated by this. And I think part of it is we all have to you don't make an excuse for them. Maybe you just, as you're complaining about unexpected losses, you have a little bit of well, he hasn't ever done this before. So if fans can be a little patient, I think we have some proof that it might be a thing that can really pay off for you. The last thing I want to say about both these coaches is Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day didn't have connections to these jobs, to Notre Dame and Ohio State before they took them. Marcus Freeman was at Notre Dame for 11 months. Ryan Day was at Ohio State for 23 months before they were elevated to head coach. They didn't grow up. Marcus Freeman's an Ohio kid. He goes to Ohio State. Ryan Day's in New Hampshire. But what happens, I think, to both these guys is once you get in there and you're in the building and you realize, wow, I am lucky to be at a place like this. Notre Dame is special. Ohio State is special. I've been other places, and they aren't like this. And this is always one of those things. It's I understand the appeal. Sometimes I am very much behind the appeal of somebody who is from a place, maybe is an alum, grew up there. I like Rich Rodriguez back at West Virginia because he's lived in West Virginia and so much of his life coached at West Virginia before. But if you limit yourself to alums for your coaching pool, you're dead. You have to be open to people who really don't know you. But I think a great way to do this is to bring them in below the head coaching thing, let them understand the place, let them appreciate the place, and then elevate them. I think that has worked great with Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman. They both know how lucky they are. They both know how special those places are. And I think it is a great way of going about business. Dabo Swinney played at Alabama, but he was at Clemson. He's coaching there. He knows it's a cool place. He knows there's opportunity there. So you can't close yourself off to this. Just like me, I'm not from Ohio, but I often think sometimes that we can't control where we're born, but then we make a lot of choices in our life, right? We can't control where we're born. We can't control where our parents choose to raise us. But then when you're an adult, you can live anywhere. You can live in Maine. You can live in New Mexico. You can live anywhere. So you make a choice. When someone says, I could go anywhere, and I actually don't have any connection to you, I just think this place is cool. I choose this place. Not because it's in my blood, but because I admire it from afar and I want to be part of it. I think there's great power in that. And so I would say, but again, to build up to it is awesome. So you got to learn on the job. This is the last thing here. This Notre Dame team, if you're looking for a comparison, actually reminds me a little bit of the Jim Tressel Ohio State teams. It's more of a special teams defense kind of team. For both these quarterbacks, maybe I don't think Will Howard and Riley Leonard are first round draft pick kind of quarterbacks, but you know who they might be? When you go back and look at national championship quarterbacks, Craig Krenzel in 2002 for Ohio State, who did go on and have an NFL career. He did play in the NFL, but that guy wasn't Trevor Lawrence. That guy wasn't Joe Burrow. That guy wasn't Bryce Young. Right. So and the way they play, there's so much of Tressel in Marcus Freeman and Ohio State. And then in this situation, I think this Ohio State team is then sort of the more talent. Now, here's the thing. This is not the best team Marcus Freeman will have at Notre Dame. They have a bunch of injuries and a lot of their more elite. They have a lot of talent. They have a lot of great recruits, but some of their best recruits are younger. A guy like Bryce Young. Right, he's only going to get better. He's a young defensive end who's playing now. They're only, for real, Notre Dame's in the national championship game. They're only going to get better. This is far from the best Notre Dame team you'll see. So, but the way they play, right now, They're more like the Ohio State team that's going to go up against Miami in 2002. And Ohio State is Miami, supremely talented Miami. They're more like the Tressel teams maybe in 2006 and 2007, and that lost to Florida and LSU, those talented SEC teams. Maybe it's a little more like going up against Bama, right? In 2014, Ohio State is an underdog to Bama because Bama's Bama. So it's like as Ohio State's there and Notre Dame's trying to get up there. It's not a perfect comparison. And I'm not asked, like, of course, Ohio State fans are rooting for Ohio State, but there's a lot of DNA here. But the other thing is, I think there's a lot of Tressel DNA in what Ryan Day is doing. Like, I think Ryan Day and Jim Tressel, Tressel's been around a little more now, I think, this year. And the bigger picture on this is Jim Tressel was a very successful coach at Ohio State. And then he kind of got swamped by the uber talent SEC super team era. And if the sport is flattening out and we are seeing teams, especially SEC teams, less able to gather talent and just bludgeon people, now everybody has more of a chance. And I think like we're maybe back to that a little bit. We're like Jim Tressel he didn't win at Ohio State because he recruited all stars. Now, when you got Terrell Pryor, I think like as that era evolved, he felt like I need to recruit more. And I think in the end, the need to gather better talent in some ways. But in the first half of his career, you didn't have to do that. And then Urban Meyer and Nick Saban at Florida and Alabama ushered in this era where they're just collecting talent and bludgeoning you. A little bit because of the portal, because of NIL, because of the things we've talked about on the show all season, where it gives teams like this more of a chance. So there are other coaches who have succeeded this way for sure. It's just my shorthand because I've been around Ohio State. So I'm like super interested in that. And Jim Tressel's fingerprints are kind of all over both of these programs, I think, in a lot of ways. So anyway, all I would say is, again, to argue, I don't think anyone's arguing that Ohio State's not more talented. They are more talented. But like nobody, I certainly am not. Landis is not. TShoe is not. On this show, we are not underestimating Notre Dame at all because they do have I think Ohio State also has a great culture and probably a little more talent. So then that's tough. So I think it's going to be a really good game, but I just would ask you to like maybe take all this coaching stuff into advisement as we try to analyze these guys. That sometimes it's hard to be perfect right away, but it's also hard to learn in the spotlight. But if you feel like Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman had to be the head coaches at this team, whether they were ready or not, now here we are. Year 6 and year 3, now here we are. Okay, that's my speech. Let's get one of our favorite guests here on Kings of the North. It is Mike Katic. He is the center for the Indiana Hoosiers, and he will be up next on KOTN. Joined now by friend of the program. Sometimes you go to a media days and you just don't know what life is going to give you. It's Mike Katic, the center for the Indiana Hoosiers this past amazing season of Indiana football. And it just so happens, Mike, that we'd want to talk to you anyway, but it's like, oh man, I wonder who we could talk to about Indiana football playing Notre Dame and Ohio State this year. So you're going to give us some scouting reports. We're going to talk about the Hoosiers. But it's great to have you back on KOTN.
Absolutely. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me on.
So I like sent Mike, our producer Mike, the stuff that we're going to talk about. I'm going to jump a second here because we want to get scouting reports on the Buckeyes and the Fighting Irish because you played both of them. But can I just like do this first for you? Like the debate that started around Indiana football right after the playoff loss to Notre Dame. And, people were like, I don't know if Indiana should have been in the playoff. And then guess what? It turns out that Indiana football this year was 11-0, beating teams by an average score of 46-13 when you weren't playing teams that were going to be in the national championship game. And then Indiana's only 2 losses were against the 2 national championship teams on the road for both those games. So what did you think of that discussion that started in college football after your season ended? And what maybe do you think of it now?
Yeah, there's all this bias and things like that. I don't know if I want to get really into it, but, all this talk about how Indiana didn't play anyone. We didn't deserve to be where we were. I think what we see now could kick all that out the door.
Yeah.
I think the way we played both these teams on the road in tough environments. Notre Dame in the college football playoff, first 12-team college football game ever. Just goes to show you how good we really were. And I don't really I don't really care about what anyone says about us on the media. I know what was in the locker room, and I know what we put out on the field on Saturdays. So, all that noise is fine, but in reality, the 2 teams we lost to on the road are in the national championship, and not many people can say their only 2 losses are the national championship.
And if you're going to lose to somebody, this is going to be the case for you guys. It's like, well, they went on and won it all. They beat everybody else too. That's kind of a cool thing to say.
Exactly.
And by the way, you guys beat Michigan in a tight game. And then Michigan, it turns out, was like, oh, you mean the Michigan team that beat Ohio State and Alabama to end the season? Right. That Michigan team that wasn't perfect, but also was pretty tough, was really good defensively, and beat 2 monsters at the end of the year. And in the moment, there were some people who were like, I don't know, Indiana didn't beat Michigan by much. And it's like, they beat Michigan. Michigan has a bunch of, you were blocking. My God, that Michigan game. It's like, hey, Mike, what'd you do in the Michigan game? It's like, I just blocked first rounders all game.
Yeah, I was talking to my friends the other day, the way Michigan ended that season after our game, it was incredible. They go to Columbus, they win, and then they go to a bowl game and beat Alabama. That's tough. I don't care what you're. I don't care who you are. That's tough to do.
Yeah,
and like you said, I was blocking Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, who are going to be is unbelievable player. That kid's unbelievable, and it's great.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun thing. That's like you tell the grandkids about being part of this Indiana football season, the experiences you had with your teammates and the way the fans got behind this team and this great year you had. And then it's also like, oh yeah, that guy over there who's super famous now. Like, yeah, I blocked that guy.
Yeah.
Like that guy over there, I blocked that guy. So anyway, final analysis is Indiana football was pretty good this year. That's the official analysis of that. Yep. We'll get back to that in a little bit, but I want to get to sort of scouting out some stuff here because nobody knows a team better than an opponent who prepared for them all week and then took them on the field. Let's start with Notre Dame because that's the one that's freshest in your head. One of the things that happened in the Notre Dame Indiana game was that Riley Mills got hurt and he is out now. For the rest of the year. And Notre Dame has overcome a lot of these injuries, but I'm just curious, getting ready for for Notre Dame, he played 19 snaps in that game against you guys before he got hurt. What did you think of Riley Mills as you prepped for him? And in your analysis, how much of a loss do you think that has been for Notre Dame to not have him?
Yeah, we knew going into that game, he was one of the guys up front. Really big dude, really smart player. Has a nose for the football, nose for the quarterback. Made a lot of hay, just kind of sloughing off and making plays, spying the quarterback, things like that. So he's a very savvy and smart player. And not having him for the past 2 games now and for the national championship obviously hurts them. But I think Howard Cross and Donovan Heinisch, the 2 guys that have been getting most of the snaps now. They're great players too, and we scouted them just as we did Riley. So, they've proved that they can play, against Georgia and against Penn State. So, I think they're both great players, and they're solid for Notre Dame.
So it's one of those things, like going into that Notre Dame Georgia game, I thought Notre Dame would win. I thought Notre Dame had everything they needed to win. But that's like, when people talk about college football the past couple of years, Georgia on both sides of the lines in the trenches, you would think, man, like that's about as good as it gets. We know how good their defensive line, the guys they've sent to the NFL, but they had a bunch of NFL guys on the offensive line too. What did you think, knowing Notre Dame? Did you think Notre Dame would be able to handle itself in the trenches against a team like Georgia?
Well, I think, in going into the game when we played them, we knew they were an undersized group.
Okay.
Like their biggest guy up in the front seven was 280 pounds. But Notre Dame, their scheme is so good and they bring a lot of twists and blitzes and they're constantly moving. And that's really hard to block as an offensive line because they're bringing all this different looks and different pressures and personnel. So it's a lot more that the offensive line has to prepare for. And that's just an added preparation that, and takes time out of our practices and things to hone in on those details. But, I go watching the Notre Dame Georgia game, I thought, since Notre Dame's so undersized up front that Georgia, maybe would have their way with them, but I was mistaken on that. And I saw a lot of missed assignments on Georgia's O-line. And that, that's credit to Notre Dame and how much they move and twist and try to confuse the offensive lines that they play. And they did it against Georgia and ultimately, dominated that game. And yeah, it's just that's what we saw a lot of. Even though they're undersized, they can move and they can twist and shift and things like that.
So, the Notre Dame players talk about it, that they feel like Al Golden as a defensive coordinator is aggressive and everybody likes to be aggressive. But when you talk about the different looks they give you and how much they move around, do they do that more than most teams? Like, was that the defense you faced this season that moved around the most?
Yeah, they're up there, definitely.
Okay.
It's usually teams like Notre Dame that are, they didn't choose to be undersized, but that's just the guys they have.
Yeah.
And they have to use that to their advantage because, the more undersized, the more quick and twitchy you are and can two-gap slant, can bring the linebackers and twist the DN around them. So, there's so many more things you can do with a quick and twitchy front seven that, teams like Ohio State, teams like Michigan, and things like that with the bigger front seven can't, do as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, they've moved and twisted more than we see in the Big Ten, but I think that's to their advantage.
So for Ohio State's offensive line, as they get prepared for this, what is the key for any offensive line when you're going against a defense that is going to do that? What do you work on in practice during the week, and what do you have to do well to be able to block those guys?
Well, a lot of it is with your eyes. If you don't have good eyes, you're not going to be able to block a twisting and moving front seven that well. And it's a lot of first and second steps. So how our coach explains it, because the movement comes, right after the snap, if you have a too big of a step or too slow of a first step, you're going to be behind or you're going to be ahead of the twist. So there's a lot of things that go into it. And, our coach teaches like short, choppy steps, but powerful and controlled steps so that we can, see the movement and use our eyes and get our feet in position to strike and to be in the best position for these movements and things like that. So that's what we were working on in practice, leading up to game days, just honing in on our first and second steps and getting our eyes up for all the movement and the blitzing linebackers and things.
Okay. And I love like this offensive line, defensive line talk, but when you're preparing as an offense, how much, you look at Notre Dame's defense, again, the idea that they've lost Ben Morrison for the year, they've lost Jordan Botelho for the year, like they're down guys, but Xavier Watts is still such a playmaker for them on the back end. Just when you looked at that Notre Dame defense holistically preparing for them, who were the guys that jumped out in the prep that was Watts a guy that got everybody's attention?
Well, for me, I don't really look at the exterior.
What's going on over there?
Yeah,
I'm not worried about that.
We knew he was a great player. We knew that he was kind of the commander back there in the secondary. But I mean, him, Kaiser, the linebacker, Owen, the linebacker, the three interior guys that kind of rotated. Those were all the guys that we really honed in on. But I can't really speak to the exterior as much as I can the front.
Yeah. Ask the offensive line guy about the defensive line, Doug. I'm like, hey, how's your safety scouting as a center? None. None, Doug. None. Right. What did you think of being in Notre Dame Stadium, the way that team played, that crowd, Marcus Freeman as a head coach, just like, and I want to ask you about both these teams. Like, what was your take on sort of like the vibe around Notre Dame when you played them?
Oh, it was unbelievable. And so I went to a camp there when I was in high school because they were recruiting our quarterback who committed to Notre Dame, Phil Dracovic, and then my tackle in high school committed to Notre Dame as well, Andrew Kristofic, and he just got done playing after last season. But I was there with no fans. It was in the summer, so it wasn't really lively. And then I got there for the game, and first of all, beautiful visiting locker room, I will say. I'm a big critique on visiting team locker rooms, so that's up there with UCLA and I think those two are at the top of my list. But back to the question you asked. No, the fans and the environment and the atmosphere was unbelievable. When me, Justice, and James Carpenter went out, for captains, we lined up and all the lights went out, and they did the prayer and sang the "Here Come the Irish." I mean, it was pretty cool. And I just kind of looked back. I stood back and I just took it all in. And
nice,
really cool environment and very historic place. And I think Coach Freeman's doing a great job there. And it was a really cool experience, really cool game.
So let's give it away now, Mike. You told me that you are potentially looking to become part of the media space. Yeah. I am totally down for Mike Katic cribs visiting locker rooms, and you just go. You go to 134 stadiums around the country, and you're like, "Look at this urinal. This is terrible." Or like,
I could give you a whole spiel about every team in the Big Ten. I could go on for hours about visit because I'm a huge as a big guy, we need our space. I can't be crammed in a high school locker when the whole line's next to me and I'm trying to change when I'm bumping into naked guys and I'm like, dude, I need some space. And I will say Notre Dame gave me that space. And it was pretty incredible.
I mean, I don't want to get too personal here, but like, how much bumping is there in visiting locker rooms sometimes?
Oh,
right?
And I don't even want to talk about Purdue because I dislike them so much. But their visiting locker room is one of the worst in the country. It's disgusting. It's like pink. And that's not bumping. And I don't like that. I don't like. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into that because I'll start ripping hairs out. But.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, these are your brothers, right? But still, with your brothers, you don't want to be bumping into them when you're wet and naked.
100%.
Because I like my story. Like I've obviously never been a football player, but I've been in locker rooms covering things, and I tell a story about after an NFC Championship game between the Eagles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was in the Tampa Bay locker room, and Warren Sapp went past me like with two little hand towels, one in the front and one in the back. And it was kind of like a moment. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening here? And that's just your life. That's just your life in the locker room, man.
It is. And they don't give us, and the towels they give us for away games are a lot smaller than the towels we have at our home games.
Yeah.
So it's a sight to see, but I don't know if you want to see it. That's the
thing. Okay. Transitioning back to football. When you played Ohio State, that Ohio State front, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer on the edges, but in the middle, Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams. What were you guys talking about in prepping for them? And then what was it like when you went up against them?
Yeah, well, in prep, because those are the guys I've been playing for the last 3 to 4 years now. So I kind of knew how they played, and Ohio State's scheme is more so straightforward than Notre Dame, because they have the size and the strength to do it. They don't have to twist and move and do all that kind of thing. So they played a lot more straightforward. But then again, they do bring a lot of exotic blitzes and packages with their linebackers, because I could be wrong, but I think they're like converted DBs, maybe.
Yeah. Sonny Styles. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah. So they're super quick dudes. So it's really easy for them to bring them on exotic blitzes and coming from depth and things like that. So we had some trouble with that, but up front, obviously Jack Sawyer and JT are unbelievable players, and so is Ty and Tyleek. But I think they work so well together. They know their strengths as a group, and I think when they're most successful is when they exploit the weaknesses of the offensive line with their strengths as a D line. So, and they did that a lot against us. We struggled early, obviously with the snap count and the noise and things like that. But they kind of got an early vibe that they brought some exotic things and we weren't picking it up, and they kept exposing us on that. And the offensive line did not play our best game. But yeah, they just have a bunch of dudes that play really well together and have a great camaraderie on the field.
So if I'm getting this right, what you're talking about with Notre Dame is more just of games up front with twists and stunts, but Ohio State is going to bring a linebacker, bring a safety, bring extra guys. What's it like again? This is football 101, but you're living it. Yeah. What does an offensive line have to do to make sure they're picking up blitzers from depth? How do you do that effectively?
Well, I think first of all, you got to know the personnel. You got to know who's on the field. Obviously, Caleb Downs is a really, really good player, and they like to bring him in the box a lot on third blitzes and things like that. And we knew that. We prepared for that. But also, the biggest thing about picking up these pressures and things is getting everyone on the same page, getting the running back, the tight ends, quarterback all on the same page of where we're going. If we're in a 3-man sword to the field and they bring pressure from the boundary, we know that the running back should be picking up that guy because, we have the 2 downs and the linebacker to the field. It's things like that. And, sometimes with the chaos of that crowd and things, and, we weren't prepared. Like, we knew it was going to be loud, but it was way louder than we even thought.
Okay.
And, they just did a good job of disguising their blitzes and confusing us. And we couldn't get the right calls to the running back and things like that. So, and credit to them, they knew that and they exposed us in that. But it's just a bunch of little things, but it all boils down to communication and getting everyone on the same page.
And so when you talked about Notre Dame and like sort of that they'll play those games more than anybody, Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, the blitz packages that they'll use and the way they'll bring guys, are those more difficult to handle than some of the other teams you face? Like how good is Knowles and Ohio State at that kind of thing?
Very good. Because they utilize Caleb Downs really well. They utilize him in the box and in pressure looks, because he's such a dynamic player and he's so good. But and then along with the very fast and quick linebackers, it was hard for me because we went to silent count. So before I snapped the ball, I dipped my head, and the guys were timing up snaps, and they got a head start on me. So it was tough for me to get back to the twist and things like that.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think Coach Knowles did a great job against us, bringing the exotic looks. I mean, we prepared for it in practice, but it's just about, translating that into game day, and we didn't do a good enough job of that.
And then you'd been there before, but what would you say? What was the environment? What were the vibes like around Ohio State and that crowd in that stadium at that point in the season?
Yeah, I think that was my 3rd time playing there at the Shoe. I mean, one of them was in 2020, so there was no crowd, but we played them in 22 there, and it wasn't nearly as loud as it was this year. I mean, I was telling the O-line, like, it gets loud, but it's no louder than Michigan or things like that. But I was mistaken on that early on.
Wow.
It was so loud. I couldn't hear Curtis to save my life. And it was nuts.
Wild. Okay. As you're talking about this communication on the offensive line, both the offensive lines for Ohio State and Notre Dame have dealt with injuries this year. Notre Dame, again, now has lost another guy. Anthony Knapp is out at left tackle. My guess, it seems like Charles Jagg, you saw, is going to wind up at left tackle, which is he was supposed to be the starter, and he got hurt in the preseason. But they've moved guys around on the interior through the course of the season. Emil Wagner's been there the whole time at right tackle. But and then Ohio State, they lose Seth McLaughlin at center. He was. I mean, I'm sure you know Seth. I mean, you guys, it's a center brotherhood.
Yeah.
And then they lost Josh Simmons, their left tackle. For any team, to me, I think it can simultaneously be true that health on the offensive line, I think, can be a great indicator of how good your season can be. Because sometimes you look at great teams and it's like, man, they started the same 5 guys all year. But on the other hand, you have to be prepared for injuries. And I don't think it is too much to ask a great team to have a 6th and a 7th guy, maybe an 8th guy ready to go, because offensive line injuries are not unusual. When you see an offensive line that's dealing with injuries and doing it successfully, how hard do you think that is to do?
It's very hard. And this year and last year, we had pretty good health on the offensive line for Indiana. Drew went down this year before the Michigan game. But other than that, it's so important to have this chemistry and continuity and camaraderie on the offensive line, because it helps you gel so much better. Because, when you take as many reps as an offensive line does because you take, the left guard will take reps with the left tackle. Left guard will take reps with the center and things like, there's like little pods, and once you know how, your guy plays and passes off twists and, how big of steps he takes and things like that, then you gel really well. So, seeing how Seth went down for Ohio State and the left tackle went down for Notre Dame, there's got to be this new gelling that has to happen, this new time of learning how that guy plays. And I'm sure taking reps with each other. The ones have taken reps with the back, the kid that came in for Notre Dame. But now it's game speed. Now you have to elevate your preparation in a way that you can prepare for game speed with a new left tackle, with a new center. So there's so many things that go into injuries on the offensive line and building back that camaraderie and that gelling and that chemistry that you have. It's hard to do, but it takes time. But, you're going to have to do it. It's just something it's a part of the game.
Okay. Knowing what you know about these two teams, having faced both of these teams, I'm not necessarily asking for a pick, but do you think somebody has an edge on Monday night?
Yeah, I think so.
Who do you think has the edge? All right, since I gotta make you do it. But it's not bulletin board. You're just a guy. You're just a guy who might be in the media, who played 6 years of high-level college football. You're just a man.
I'll say this. I'll say Ohio State, just for the reason that they're in the Big Ten, and it would be great if a Big Ten team won the national championship. But I have some friends on Notre Dame. There's some things. Okay. I'm saying that just for the sole purpose of that, for the Big Ten winning a national championship. No other reason. Okay, conference pride. Mike Katic has conference pride. This season for Indiana, what will you remember about it? What do you think people on the outside should remember about it? I mean, we have a little distance here, and that Indiana was part of the first 12-team playoff, man, is something that that program you'll always be able to hold up as a great accomplishment. There's so many things I can be proud of, but it's just, I think I'm most proud of just the guys and how just how close we were as a team. It's so important for a college team to be close and to hang out with each other outside of the stadium and just be around your guys. And I think that's what I'm going to be most proud of, and that's what I'm going to miss the most is the locker room and how close everyone was. Like, I could go, like, O-line and DBs don't really get along most of the time. It's just like D linemen and wide receivers. Like, it's just one of the things. They're skinny, we're fat. It's kind of like, we don't really hang around them much. But I could go over to the DB's side of the locker room and chill with them. And they, a lot of them called me Unk because I'm, 23, 24 playing college football still. So it's just like, that's what I'm going to miss the most. And I think fans, our fans were so amazing this year. We packed the stadium. We had like 5 sellouts, which is insane for Indiana football. Like, I've never been a part of that. And I'm just so happy for the fans and for the community to rally around this team and rally around Coach Sig the way they did. It was truly incredible. And there's such a pride about football here, but it just there needed to be a team like ours to really break through and have that pride for this community. And I could go on and on about this team and the players and how close we all were in the O-line, but I don't know. It was awesome.
I've been smoking cigs all year.
Damn right.
Yep. I mean, like, we don't want to encourage smoking on this show.
Exactly.
But candy cigarettes, you guys ever pop a candy cigarette after a victory there in the locker room?
Cigars.
I
don't know about candy cigs, but after the Purdue game, after we whooped their tails.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We were smoking cigars. We were having a great time.
All right. Future. How can Indiana football build on this season? It feels like Fernando Mendoza at QB is a nice add in the portal. Do you think this is the start of something? What can Indiana football be?
Absolutely. I think Indiana football could be whatever they want.
Yeah.
They have a guy at the helm right now that is a great leader of men, and he holds everyone to a certain standard, and it's a new standard for Indiana football. And I think we needed that. We needed, we needed to have this season to really show people that the sky's the limit for us. And Coach Dig does so well in the transfer portal and recruiting, and so do all the coaches. But I think, the sky's the limit for this group and this university. And I'm so excited to finally be a fan now.
Yeah.
Back to the games and just watch as a fan. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
Awesome. It's beautiful stuff, man. It's been beautiful for us. Who knew? Big Ten Media Days. We had you on during the year. And to wrap this up now, I hope and I would guess this is not the last time that you will be on Kings of the North, Mike Katic. But congratulations on everything, on your tremendous career, on this tremendous year, and nothing but the best for what's next. I'm sure it'll be great.
Thank you so much. Big fan of the program. Let's go.
And we got a Northern National title game. All North National title game, right? And listen, before I let you go, the South can cram it, right? Yeah. Can't the SEC cram it?
Oh, God, I could go in. Oh, geez. I got too excited. I could go into a whole rant about SEC and all the hypotheticals. You know what? The Big Ten is where it's at, baby. The Big Ten is where it's at. Woo!
Yeah. Hypotheticals. They live in a hypothetical world, but the worm has turned.
Yeah. You know what? The North is where it's at. The Big Ten's where it's at.
I'll tell you, there was a time during the year when I was worried that even at 11-1, they were going to screw you guys. Yeah.
No, you never know. It's because of the emblem we have on our helmet.
Yep. But you guys earned it. And the way this season has evolved, I think the respect for Northern football, we don't ignore the past and what the SEC and the South have done for the previous 20 years, but that's not now.
Nope.
That's not today. That's not when we have Michigan and Washington in the title game last year, and Notre Dame and Ohio State in it this year, and all these other Northern teams who can hang. The season you had, the season Penn State had, what Oregon has become. This isn't changing, man. This is the new reality.
Yep. You couldn't say it better myself.
That's sweet dragon.
Candy cigs. Keep smoking on them candies.
That's some good sugar. That's some good sugar. That's some good northern sugar right there, baby. All right. We had to get each other wound up before we let you go. It's always great to see you. We will see you soon. Mike Katic, thanks for being here on Kings of the North.
Thanks so much again for having me on.
Back on KOTN, man, that guy's going to take my job. It's going to take my job. That's okay. He earned it. Love Mike Katic. You see these people sometime. I can remember just being around Mark Titus at Ohio State basketball. I was like, this guy's going to be in the media someday, and he's going to do it, and he went and did it. So Mike Katic's going to be a thing, and we're glad that he was so generous to give us some time here on KOTN. We're going to get to TShoe in a second, but we want to talk about another like little fun gambling thing that's free. Our friends at poolpartygaming.com, who have run our bowl pick'em and bracket contest for KOTN. Obviously, like, it's too late to get in that, but if you were already in that, there's a tiebreaker prop bet thing that they have put together. I helped a little bit with some things about like over-unders, comparing players who will have more receiving yards, who will have more touchdowns, that kind of thing. It's just fun to do. So if you're in the mix, like to be at the top of our bracket or a bowl preview, make sure you go do that, because this is the tiebreaker, but also you can just do it for fun separately. So just go to poolpartygaming.com. and you'll be able to figure out what to do to sign up for this national championship game prop bet contest. And then you just watch the game and it's like, oh, I said this guy would have more than 42 receiving yards. Am I right or wrong? It's just a fun extra little thing to do. And I think there's a couple little prizes there. So our friends at poolpartygaming.com have done a great job with this. We're super excited that we were able to have our little KOTN thing. We'll wrap it up and give everybody credit and get the prizes sent out. I still got to tell you what they are, but I made some shirts. That'll be part of it. And it's fun to have like little stuff for our community. So again, if you missed it before, go there now, poolpartygaming.com, and you can be part of the national championship game prop bet competition. All right. For other gambling stuff, it's our guy TShoe. So during the year, a lot of you guys know, we had a Friday morning separate betting show. This is just one game. We don't need a whole show. So we're going to do this, and then we'll come back after TShoe. And I actually have one more thing about Marcus Freeman that I meant to say. I wrote it in the notes and I forgot to say it, and I am going to say, and it's about statues. But first, our betting analyst, Tyler Shoemaker, here on KOTN. Joined now on Kings of the North by your friend and mine, Tyler Shoemaker, TShoe, the official betting analyst of KOTN. TShoe, what a game for you, brother. I mean, people are fans. You're an Ohio State fan, yep, but you have also been like the number one backer of Notre Dame from a power rating betting analyst perspective the entire year. This is the TShoe game.
This is like the TShoe Bowl. Definitely have mixed feelings, because I mean, you kind of do develop this affinity for Notre Dame, the way they've treated us in the betting market throughout the year. And just being kind of a pseudo fan from that standpoint, taking on the team that I actually cheer for. So definitely going to be, difficult from that standpoint, because I've had some really good positive interactions with Notre Dame fans over the course of the season, and they've, really hyped me up on Twitter. And I'm sure now they're going to have to mute me because I'm probably going to be insufferable this weekend. So, from that standpoint, it's going to be, kind of difficult, but I'm excited. We were just talking, I'm 95% sure I'm going to be there, barring something crazy happening. So I'm excited to see it.
Awesome. So you have a couple bets for this game. I have a couple bets for this game. Just to remind the good people, we're doing okay in the postseason on our bets. That we are not betting our own company money on these like we were doing during the year. But I'm 6-4 in the postseason. You're 8-4 in the postseason, and you were 4-0 in the semis. TShoe, like it's all coming up TShoe. Because part of it, because when you and I talked about Notre Dame, Penn State, one of my bets was my bet was Notre Dame under 2.5 touchdowns. You were Notre Dame over 22.5 points. After the first half, when Notre Dame did score a touchdown, I was like, I feel really good about this. And there was a way that, 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals, we both would have won. But the way that game turned, you practically nailed the final score. Did you feel like your math in the end had an excellent handle on the Notre Dame Penn State game?
Yeah, that was really encouraging. And, obviously I've talked before, you try not to put too much, as far as from my process standpoint, you try not to put too much on any given game. But yeah, that was one of those games that was really encouraging. I was telling my wife, oh my God, I'm about to nail the final score if Notre Dame comes down and kicks a field goal here. So it definitely did feel good, especially again on a team like Notre Dame that just constantly has been undervalued by the betting market, and TSI has just been ahead of the game on that. So it definitely felt good to see that final score play out almost exactly as I predicted.
Yeah. So let's listen to what this guy says about Notre Dame. I hope you guys have made some money off TShoe and on his Notre Dame bets all year. The line for this game opened at 9.5. Ohio State favored, went to 8.5, went back to 9.5, went to 8.5, went to 7.5, went back to 8.5, went to 7.5. And as we sit here now, it's 8.5 or 8. Are you getting any reads off this line movement? So let's talk about that first before we get into your numbers. You like to read line movement, and we're recording this on Thursday afternoon. Do you think there could be any line movement before kickoff on Monday night that would tell you anything, or is it anything so far told you anything?
I wouldn't say anything so far has necessarily told me a whole lot, because it's just been kind of pinging back and forth between key numbers. It hasn't touched 7, it hasn't touched 10. So, from 7.5 to 9.5 doesn't tell me a whole lot. Now, what will really tell me a lot is if this gets to 7, and I'm not necessarily talking about at DraftKings necessarily, but if you see Circa or Bookmaker or some of these sharper books touch 7, I will be, kind of on alert. As an Ohio State fan, that'll get my antennas up a little bit. And then conversely, if it touches 10, and that, then that would kind of go the other way and make me feel pretty good as an Ohio State fan. To be honest with you, there's math to support both ways here. So I know we're going to get into that here probably in just a second. So I'll hold off on that, but there is math to kind of support either way you want to go here.
Because the thing that the people come for is sometimes this guy wears a cape when he's reading about the fives. But then I think the two things, your numbers, but also your reading of the market are really where I think there are advantages to be gained here. So we talked about reading the market. You would be on alert. So yeah, but let me on the last reading of the market. If you're an Ohio State fan and it gets down to 7, there would be a part of me that would think, hey, it's only 7. It's only a touchdown. I'm really going to hammer Ohio State now. But are you saying actually that should make Ohio State fans and Ohio State bettors cautious? And the same thing for Notre Dame. If it gets to 10 and Notre Dame fans are like, man, I'm getting 10 points with my team, I'm taking Notre Dame. Should you actually be cautious if it feels like the number is moving to sort of help you as a bettor on the team you love?
Yeah, and it's a case by case basis. There's not a blanket, strategy I can give you on that. But as far as this game goes, it's a standalone game. They're gonna take in millions and millions of betting handle on this game, obviously. So when you get that much liquidity, that much money in the market on a game, and you see the line again, especially at the sharp books, but even if DraftKings and FanDuel touch 7 or 10, that can be a little telling.
Okay.
And that would tell you the books are more comfortable taking, for instance, if it gets to 7, books are more comfortable taking Ohio State -7 money than Notre Dame +7.5 money. And that would be cause for that's interesting. Okay. Now, again, that's not a foolproof way to analyze games. And, just looking at the number is not a foolproof way, but I think you nailed it by taking those two things hand in hand. Now, if the game, so my official number on the game is Ohio State -11. So the one thing I would tell people is most of the time I'm mostly concerned about what the initial line movement was at the sharp books. And the initial line movement did go in favor of Ohio State. It did go from 8.5 to 9.5.
Okay.
So the initial sharp bettors that, get down as soon as these lines come out, they were on Ohio State, which, again, take that for what it's worth. It's not a foolproof method, but that in conjunction with my number makes me feel cautiously optimistic about an Ohio State win and cover here.
Okay. So you have loved Notre Dame from a TShoe index, a TSI standpoint, the TShoe index. You have had at times Notre Dame rated number one in some of your systems. Is that correct?
Yeah, these teams have pretty much been jockeying back and forth 1 and 2 for the last 6-8 weeks.
Okay. So how does that mean that you have arrived at Ohio State minus 11?
Because, and this is where I say there's math to support both. So if you look at the season-long metrics, so factoring every game equally, essentially, every Power 4 game equally.
Okay.
I would make that like Ohio State minus 5-ish.
Okay.
But what I've been doing and what's been extremely successful for me so far in the playoff has been taking, so half of the rating is made up of your full season number, and then the other half of the rating is what you've done in your last 3 games, to try to capture these. Like, this Ohio State team comes to mind, 2019 LSU comes to mind. We're like, because people argue with me all the time about my rating on 2019 LSU, and it's like they weren't that team all season. They didn't just destroy everyone all season, but they caught on fire in the playoff, and that's what I think this Ohio State team is doing. So I wanted to try to capture that to give the most accurate reflection of what team is going to show up in this game. And I think I found that's worked out really well so far in the playoffs. So that's how I arrive at Ohio State minus 11 rather than Ohio State minus 5.
Okay. That's interesting. I really was coming in here wondering if there was going to be a decent number, of like that you'd be on Notre Dame, just based on that before. But I think that's a very reasonable explanation of why you have Ohio State minus 11, and it's been successful in the playoff. This means like just using your rating to try to pick these playoff games and how to bet these playoff games. That's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, and it's not something, I don't think it's something that I'm going to do like throughout the regular season. I don't think I'm going to take a team's last 3 games, because like playing, a stretch of Rutgers, Illinois, and Maryland is not the same. Is not going to give you the same type of data points that playing Tennessee, Oregon, and Texas will. So I think it's because it's the playoff, and like, okay, this is what these teams are doing when they're trying to play their absolute A game, when they know they have to bring it, because that's obviously the type of mentality they're going to have coming into a game like this. So I don't think this is like a full-time strategy, but in terms of how I'm evaluating the playoffs and updating my ratings throughout the playoffs, this is how I'm doing it.
Okay. All right. I think that's very instructive for this audience, especially those who have been following what you've been talking about during the course of the season. So let's get down to what we are actually suggesting. Bill and I have not yet made our picks. We'll do that on Sunday in our big game breakdown. But we do have a couple bets here for you. Again, TShoe 8-4 in the playoffs. I'm 6-4 in the playoffs. What's your first bet that you would recommend for this title game?
Yeah. So I looked, and again, there's math to be, to support either way. So I didn't want to go full game, but I do like Ohio State minus 2.5 in the first quarter, even at minus 120, because it's at minus 3 at a lot of books. But I think it was DraftKings that had minus 2.5 at minus 120. So I really like that, getting under a field goal. We've talked about the importance of that over the course of this year. And, the thing that really puts me on this is Ohio State has started fast. Even in the Texas game, where they had their worst offensive performance of the postseason, they still started fast. Came down, scored on the first drive, and then they were moving the ball after that and kind of shot themselves in the foot with some penalties. So I expect kind of more of the same. There's no reason not to at this point. And especially Notre Dame has talked a lot this week. There's been a lot made of Notre Dame guys coming out saying they're going to stick to their guns and play, their man coverage like they normally do. I think they play a very heavy dose of man coverage. I would have to think that favors Ohio State. Notre Dame's defense is great. I've pounded the table for them all season. This is a different type of animal with, when you're talking about Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate, who had a great game against Texas. I think Ohio State's going to be able to get some stuff going in the passing game, and Notre Dame's going to have to adjust eventually. But I think if they're going to try to come out come out of the gates with that man-to-man strategy, I don't think it's going to work, and I think Ohio State can jump out early here.
Okay. There's been a lot of stuff, and there was once upon a time on a show we did where like just Ohio State first quarter stuff was gangbusters. So betting on the Ohio State offense to come out and start doing some stuff is the way Ohio State plays offense, often a pretty good bet. You said there's some stuff, and this is one of those, there are some states that allow player prop bets. There are some states that do not allow player prop bets. So that limits this a little bit, but are there multiple player props that if everybody allowed it, we'd be talking about like, oh, Quinshon Judkins over this rushing yards and Mitchell Evans over this receiving yards or whatever, but that because it's limited, we don't dive in quite as much. How many actual player props are you in on?
I bet like 14 props so far.
Do you feel like for the people who can bet player props, are there greater edges there? Like, do you win more on player props or on game picks?
So throughout the season, I really don't. And honestly, I'm kind of reevaluating that strategy because I have absolutely cleaned up. Anyone that follows me on Twitter knows, because I've posted before every playoff game, like these are the props I'm taking. Like if you can get them, great. And I'll be honest, the run I'm on right now in the playoffs is going to pay for my playoff ticket. For my championship game ticket. I'm serious. Like I've been cleaning up in the playoffs on player props. But just with Ohio State, I'm not necessarily betting Penn State player props because I don't have as much of a pulse on their personnel and how they want to attack and that sort of thing. Obviously, I just rely more on TSI for that. But because I'm so intricately involved with Ohio State, I just have, and you and I have talked about this, we just kind of have a pulse for what kind of game plan they might come in with, the headspace of the team and the coaching staff and that sort of thing. And that's allowed me to really kind of go crazy here in the playoffs. So I've put in a bunch of player props here for the championship.
Okay. Do you think that they should be allowed everywhere? Do you understand the states that say, because they allow player props in the NFL everywhere, but it's like, because these are amateur players and they don't want people getting, harassed on social media by people who are betting on individual players, maybe some risk of, there was a guy, an NBA guy who got a lifetime ban from the NBA because people were betting on his individual player props, even as a meaningless player. And he was like, acting like he was sick to go under his player prop. Do you think it makes sense that this is limited?
I mean, I understand. I certainly would not advocate for, abusing players, on social media or whatever. To me, it's like, if you're going to do any betting at all, then you got to do all of it. Like if you're a state, I don't, drawing the line there just seems weird to me, because you don't think the guy that drops the game winning touchdown pass or that runs in a touchdown that pushes the total over in the final seconds of a blowout. Like, you don't think that guy's getting social media abuse? Like, it's just a very weird line to draw, I think. But I get it. And again, I wouldn't advocate for that. But if you're going to let college games be bet on at all, that's just a weird line to draw for me. Yeah.
Okay. So you do have one. Is this is your favorite one, the one that you're suggesting here to the folks?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's my favorite. I gave this one because for the purpose of the show, I didn't want to just be an Ohio State homer and just give Ohio State bets. So this is something that as a Notre Dame fan, you can bet on and cheer for your team and feel good about if it cashes. So I did bet it. I mean, I do like it, but I tried to give a Notre Dame friendly bet here for our audience.
Okay. So this is Riley Leonard. Over 13.5 rushing attempts. And this is one of those where it's like, you're not even betting on like, I like this kind of bet because it's just strategy.
Yeah.
And you're not even saying like whether it's going to work or not. It's just like, I think this is what Notre Dame will choose to do, will have to do to try to win, effective or not. And so I think like if you feel like you have a handle on teams, I think bets like this are interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I can't see a world or a game plan for Notre Dame that doesn't involve a lot of design runs for Riley Leonard, and also his ability to break plays off and just take off, and take. The Ohio State defense has been susceptible to, they're not giving up 40-yarders, but they've been susceptible to giving up, 10, 12 yard chunks to quarterbacks that can run. So I think Riley Leonard's going to have to take advantage of that if Notre Dame's going to make this game, take this game down to the wire. So I really like this. I considered the rushing yards, but to your point, I was like, man, I don't want to bet on them being successful because for all we know, Jim Knowles is going to have it dialed up and Cody Simon's going to spy him or whatever. But that doesn't matter for his attempts. So I felt like this was the best angle to bet, knowing that Riley Leonard's going to have to run the ball a lot in this game.
Yeah. Okay. Those are TShoe's 2 bets. My bets are both weird. And they're both like plus money. So it's like, if it goes in my record that I missed them, like I understand that's how it's going to be, but they're both swings. One's a bigger swing than the other, but the first one is Notre Dame to have the longest touchdown in the game at plus 125 instead of Ohio State. And this is like, again, I like multiple avenues to this. One is Notre Dame's running backs break big runs. They are at near the top in the nation in 20-yard runs, 30-yard runs, 40-yard runs, 50-yard runs, 60-yard runs. This is kind of how they score. Jeremiah Love had a 98-yard run, right, against Indiana in the playoff game. This is kind of a component of what they do. So it could be that. I also do think, like Bill and I, what you said, TShoe, about Notre Dame playing man coverage and sticking with that. We've been talking about that a lot, whether that's like a head fake to be like, doing exactly what we do at you. And then they come out with like a bracket coverage on Jeremiah Smith and try to take him away. So I do think maybe Notre Dame will focus on trying to not let Ohio State break big plays. I do think Ohio State might bring some pressures that could result in Notre Dame popping something. And I even think something like the Jaden Greathouse touchdown for Notre Dame against Penn State, where a Penn State defender fell down. It's almost like a reverse psychology here, where I think Ohio State's skill players, especially in the passing game, are more dangerous than Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's defense will be focused on stopping those Ohio State skill players, where Ohio State might be more focused on trying to stop the run, or let's make sure we get after Riley Leonard. Don't let Riley Leonard run, that kind of thing. And the result is like, hey, Jordan Faison out of the house for 65 yards. So multiple avenues. Do you think these bets are stupid? Just tell me.
No, that actually makes a lot of sense. And had you not made that last point, I was going to make it for you, because that is kind of how you could see this going. Because even you think about the Ohio State-Texas game, even though Ohio State didn't score a lot of points, they were being very methodical with the ball marching down the field. Again, they just killed themselves with penalties. It wasn't that they were just like taking the top off of Texas. They were just, taking what was there. And I think Notre Dame's going to have to defend it that way, the way Texas did, the way Michigan did. And I think Ohio State, to Chip Kelly's credit, they've been patient in doing that. So I don't think I can definitely see a path where Ohio State's longest play is, maybe 20, 25 yards, but they're just taking what's there. Whereas Ohio State defensively may be up, stacking the box and trying to stop the run. And then you pop one, you get Denzel Burke. I actually wrote this up for VSiN.com today for my championship preview. I actually gave out Jaden Greathouse longest reception over, I think it's 14 and a half yards or something. Okay. I gave that out with the exact logic that you just pointed out, that I think, I think I might've heard it from you guys actually, that Riley Leonard throws best outside the numbers, and Ohio State's been most vulnerable outside the numbers. So I think they might be able to hit something down the sideline. So I think that's a great play.
Do you see this line in my head? From my
that is
crown?
Like a legit crown.
Oh,
yeah.
God. How are people monarchs? Oh my God. Oh, I can't do this. I can't wear the crown in Atlanta. My head. Oh my God. I need to get like some padding inside my head or something at the very least. This is insane. All right. Oh my God. Mike, can you do something in post-production to remove the line on my head that I made from this crown? This is crazy. What can we do with this? Oh.
I'm not sure we can do anything in post, but we might have to get you some makeup for after.
Oh my God.
I don't even know what they call a little mascara or something on it to blend it in.
I took TV classes in college, and one of the things you had to do is do your own makeup before you would go on the fake newscast. And I would have like a white collared shirt just covered with beige makeup. I was terrible. Can you imagine me in the bathroom putting on my own makeup? My face was one color. My neck was another color. Like Doug got a D in makeup application in college. My God. All right. This is my other one. A defensive or special teams touchdown by either team at plus 225. I was doing the math here. Notre Dame has 5 interception returns for touchdowns this year, 1 fumble return for a touchdown, and 1 kick return. Ohio State has 1 interception return, 3 fumble returns, 2 by Jack Sawyer, including the Texas scoop and score, and 1 punt return touchdown by Caleb Downs. So that's 7 for Notre Dame, 5 for Ohio State. And I also like blocks. That might not show up in the stats, but if you block something and run it in, Notre Dame ran the one Notre Dame regular season game I went to, they ran an awesome fake punt to Jordan Faison against Virginia for a touchdown that got called back because of a formational thing that Marcus Freeman was kind of arguing. No, we looked at the rules. That's not right. So I think Ohio State defense getting after you could do exactly like the Jack Sawyer repeat, strip sack, whatever, and a scoop and score possible. If Notre Dame does play aggressive coverage and is playing some man coverage, Will Howard has shown that he can do that. And these guys will jump routes. Leonard Moore and Christian Gray will jump routes on you. So I can see a pick 6 for Notre Dame that way. I think Marcus Freeman's going to have something. Like, how can you not? So I would not be surprised if there's a fake that could be a touchdown. Notre Dame ran a kickback against Georgia. Caleb Downs back there as a punt returner for Ohio State can be dangerous. Again, plus 225 is not great odds. So if there have been 12 in the 30 games that these teams have played, it's not quite one every other game. But I don't know. It's fun. But I can see multiple ways that these teams could score on defense or special teams. What do you think of the odds, though? What do you think of the bet at plus 225?
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think the odds are a little short here. I think this should be like plus 400 or 500. But to your point, I think it's probably that low because there are a lot of avenues that this could cash, as you pointed out. I think both quarterbacks, well, they've been good this year. I think they've both made some pretty. Sometimes, Will Howard, I think maybe has been penalized for it more, where it's like actually turned into a pick 6. Whereas I think Riley Leonard, when I've watched him, it's like, man, he's lucky that didn't get picked off and go to the house. So I think both have been a little loose with the ball at times. So I think that's definitely an avenue. You mentioned, Caleb Downs as a punt returner. Notre Dame had the kickoff return against Georgia. And I 100% agree with you. I'm totally on alert for the Marcus Freeman special on special teams where they pull something out of a hat. So, as a fan, I'm hoping Ohio State is prepared for that as well, because I definitely think Notre Dame's going to have something on special teams.
All right. So TShoe plans to be in Atlanta. Bill's going to be in Atlanta. I'm going to be in Atlanta. Producer Mike's going to be in Atlanta. We'll see you guys down there. TShoe, it's been a great ride all season. Thanks for being part of this KOTN year, man. It's been awesome.
It has been awesome. I hate that this is our last show, but been a lot of fun doing it with you. Hopefully we can run it back again, but it's always a good time, and look forward to seeing everybody in Atlanta.
TShoe is trying to get KOTN to be a WNBA show in the offseason. So we know what you're working on. We know you got other stuff popping. So we'll see. But we certainly will have Tyler Shoemaker back in the future. For now, TShoe, thanks for joining us here on KOTN.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, so thanks as always to TShoe. I know not everybody on here is a betting fan, but I like the way he breaks stuff down, and even for him to tell you that his ratings, if you look at it one way, the line would only be 5. You look at it another way, the line would be 11. I just think that's interesting to any analysis of the game. So we're gonna get out of here. There's some stuff happening, like the Department of Education and Title IX rulings, and how that might affect the way athletic departments will share the revenue that they're going to start sharing with athletes, that they have $20.5 million that now there will be direct payment to play. That's off-season talk. And it also might change with the new administration coming in. So it's one of those things. Sometimes I get it. There are certain people who react to that right now. The national championship game is on Monday. We'll talk about that later. The sport continues to evolve. I'm leaving today. We will be around, the plan is 2 p.m. live show Saturday, 1 p.m. live show Sunday, where we'll do the big game breakdown and Bill and I will make our picks. Noon show Monday as kind of a last thing before we head over to Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the national championship game. Just a great time to make sure you are subscribed on YouTube to Kings of the North so you don't miss anything. The one thing I want to talk about, Marcus Freeman and the Bears. So there's this thing, the Bears were interested in Marcus Freeman. I was even listening to a national sports podcast that knows nothing about college football. And they were like, that Marcus Freeman guy is pretty good. I think the Bears should. And it's like, okay, yeah, no, Marcus Freeman's good. Marcus Freeman's 38. Brian Kelly is the all-time leader at Notre Dame in coaching victories with 113. I just don't know if that's where you Notre Dame fans want that to stay. Newt Rockne has 105. Lou Holtz has 100. Eric Parseghian, 95. Frank Leahy, 87. Dan Devine, 53. There are 5 statues outside Notre Dame Stadium for the national championship coaches. There isn't a Kelly statue because he didn't win a championship. But the 5 statues are those other 5 guys: Rockne, Holtz, Parseghian, Leahy, and Devine. I think a statue is quite alluring. And if I had any opportunity in my life where if the end result of my success was a statue of me, man, that would be a reason to stick around and keep doing what I'm doing. I don't think Marcus Freeman should have any interest in leaving Notre Dame right now. Now, if he wins on Monday night, he might be like, check, statue, let's go. But I think Notre Dame has a chance to continue this. As I said before, like I think the recruiting is just the younger parts of the roster, or even I think higher parts, that's just going to get better. And they're going to springboard off of this. And with NIL and everybody at Notre Dame being all in on this, and I think you can combine the tradition and the campus and all the alluring things of that with some very impressive things in the modern world. I don't think Notre Dame's going away. And he could be Notre Dame's all-time leader in victories by the time he's 50. He's 33-9 right now. He's 38 years old. I mean, if he wins 10 games a year for the next 10 years, he'd be easily past Brian Kelly. I just don't think he has to be in a hurry. And I just think and right now, I think you could argue that being a head coach at a super established college football program that is in on giving you a chance to win through NIL is as good as many NFL jobs, where if you don't have the right quarterback, if you don't have a good GM, your fate is in somebody else's hand. At a program as a head coach, a college head coach, where they are willing to invest and you believe in yourself, you can win. So I don't know why you would be in a hurry to leave. And I certainly don't have any inside information on this. I would just be flabbergasted if Marcus Freeman chose to leave Notre Dame right now with what he has done in such a short period of time. So it's a great compliment for the NFL to be interested. But you do not have to be in a hurry. And you could have a statue with Newt Rockne. It's a funny thing about Notre Dame. There's a lot of these blue blood programs that have like a single guy, right? That have a Woody Hayes at Ohio State, or a Bobby Bowden at Florida State, or a Bo Schembechler at Michigan. But Notre Dame, because Newt Rockne was killed and otherwise might have piled up many more than 105 victories, they've had like multiple great coaches. And so there's a real opportunity there to be part of a prestigious club, but also, nobody at Ohio State's ever going to be Woody Hayes. I'm not saying nobody at Notre Dame's ever going to be Newt Rockne, but you really have a chance to make your mark at an all-time program. And to give that up to go to the Bears, and if Caleb Williams kind of doesn't hit, you might get fired in 40 years. I wouldn't understand it. We have plenty of time. So I am kind of not buying into any of that, because it just doesn't make sense to me. And I think if you hear people from an NFL perspective talking about it, it's because people in the NFL think there's nothing better than the NFL no matter what. And elite college football job, mid-tier NFL job, I'd take the elite college job, right? So, if you're Deion Sanders and you can go to the Cowboys, I think that's a different situation, right? But to go to the Bears are a historic franchise too. I don't see it. It's not where my head is, where Marcus's head should be at. All right, that's it. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Rostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to TShoe for everything all season. It's been great. Certainly we'll continue working with him. Thanks to Mike Katic. I would imagine it's not the last time you see him on this show, even though his college football career is done. And for all the Landis lovers, he'll be back. Saturday, we'll be reacting to everything we gather at Media Day in Atlanta tomorrow morning. And we'll bring all that to you, hopefully some clips from interviews and that kind of thing. And then we got to tell you on Sunday who we think's going to win this thing. So for now, thanks to you guys for being here. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.